When you're ready.
Awesome. So my term paper is going to be about the impact of automation in the workforce. However, this is a very broad topic that has a lot of public narratives around it. So it was a very hard decision, but we're going to narrow it down for this exercise into what's the London's adaptation capacity by 2030. So with that, we are going to talk about three things. First, I'm going to tell you what's the type of problem, what's the structure in which we can analyze this problem, and those two analyses are going to be more qualitative rather than quantitative, because there is a lot of qualitative data regarding these two things depending on the context that you are analyzing it. So I'm going to make an overall analysis. And then the third thing that I'm going to tell you is the scope. So why we chose London, I chose London, and why 2030, and I will give a bit of a glimpse of evidence, quantitative evidence in that part. So when we think about automation, we think of something like this, like a game in which you have the human teams against the robot teams, and then the public narratives in this part goes into different sides of the spectrum. The people who are very positive about it and that sees the potential, that the challenges that automatization and robots can solve for us. But then you will see other people in the other side of the spectrum that are quite concerned about what this will mean for us as a society, how we will integrate with robots, and one that are in the middle that are more like, yeah, it's good, I see the benefits, but this is going to take indeed a lot of jobs, we're not quite prepared for it, nobody's regulating this, and there's just a lot of uncertainties, which lead us to the answer of our first point. What's the type of problem that we have? We have a problem of uncertainty. So in the problem of uncertainty, something that we need to analyze is that topics that come into the mind of the public narrative is that this is the fourth industrial revolution, and it's normal that as humankind we are facing and experiencing some resistance to the change, and this change is mainly coming from different uncertainties, such as the different types of AIs that are out there or that could be out there, the type of industries that will be affected, when this will become a potential threat, where and who will be the main areas and the main amount of people that will be affected. And for that, the scope of this paper is going to make a very clear differentiation on these two scenarios. So there is two types of artificial intelligence, that is the narrow AI and the general AI, and those two are a threat to the workforce in different levels, because these ones attack, on a way of saying, the workforce that are more based in a specific task, repetitive task, which mainly are for the low skill amount of the population. This one that we are not quite there yet, the general AI, is the one who will potentially put a threat into jobs that require social skills and learning skills. So for this, in here, there's a mixture in between the two of them, and is what is going to be the impact in the workforce when we have the interconnectedness of many of these already existing narrow AIs, such as the IoT and the self-learning, that only in 2016, 2017 we're starting to see that the robots are starting to get. But for the sake of the scope of this paper, we're only going to focus in here. Okay? So this is just a big, complex socio-technical system that has multiple actors. In here, it's a brief attempt and an initial attempt to make an analysis of what is causing the problem. So basically, the first thing that we need to understand is the automation, it's making revenue. And once you start making revenue, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when and how it's going to happen. So with that, we start analyzing that the revenue comes at the cost of human labor, that this reduces the amount of expected wages, the population that is not employed, that is not reemployed, means that they don't have enough money to spend, hence affecting the companies that are making the goods that they are automating. So it will also be a risk for the company itself that is destroying the jobs, and at the same time, then both government, so civil society, and private sector need to make an analysis of what's going to be the structure strategies that we're going to do to replace jobs and reduce unemployment? Is it going to be participation in educational programs? Awesome. But if they don't have this disposable income, they cannot afford to get the new skills that are needed into a fourth industrial revolution. So how we are going to make this ability to reskill the new force? Creation of new jobs, sure, but how many? Are they enough? Isn't the population growing a lot in a faster space that new jobs are being created? So it's, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, a very complex system, but it has some solutions. In here, there are three of the main ones that are being spoke about. So the first one is universal basic income, but this might have some pros and cons that we are about to analyze. Finland is a pioneer country when it comes to implement this, and they are making a policy experimentation in which 2,000 people are already getting a universal, a basic income to diminish the impact of employment there. The other one is the participation in educational programs with the need to reskill the workforce, because at the end of the day, yes, new jobs will be created, but not the people is not prepared in the hard skills that are needed, such as engineering, programming, STEM in general, but also the social abilities that are also needed, dexterity, selling skills, social skills. And the last one is the taxing robots. It's another thing, like if your company is destroying the jobs, you're gonna pay for it. But this paper aims to analyze if there are more solutions that applies to London, and if there could be more new solutions as well that haven't been discussed. Most of this information has been taken out of the Centre of London, that they're doing a research about this, and this is like the main things that it's in the map that have been happening. So this leads us that this is a multi-scalar, multi-actor governance model that brings a lot of complexities, because in the question of what should be done and who should be doing it, nobody knows. Everybody feels scared, even the companies feel scared, but nobody's really giving an answer. And when you think about Londoners and what do they think, out of a survey of 2,000 people that was conducted by PwC, 2% said that they're extremely concerned about what the impact of automatization is going to bring to London. 5% said they're moderately concerned, and then the rest said that they even haven't thought about it before. So it's also interesting to see how this is going to tackle different perspectives. And in this part, I think that one interesting thing is that in the power dependency that are in between the actors, especially between the private sector and the public sector, we will see that probably none of them will know what to do. And they will have to start implementing a set of policy experimentations that are compromises from both sides, in which both of them, not only the government, will have to steer and guide the direction as they learn, creating a single, double, and hopefully triple loop learning circle, because it's the only way that apparently can be done. So to finalize with the third question, why London and why 2030? So first, London, because it's a city, and city concentrates the vast majority of the world's population, and London is one of the world's most important cities in the world. The second one, it's because London is located in a developed economy. It has a lot of chances to develop or import the technology that will automatize jobs, things that will not happen, for example, in Bogota or in like cities that are also cities, but we just don't have the money to do it. And the third reason is because the impact that this city could have potential repercussions in the rest of the rural UK. And this can be an example that can be set, again, in the triple loop learning model for cities in Southeast Asia and Latin America in the future. So yeah, what are the next steps? The next steps is locate and quantify what are exactly the uncertainties and the certainties that we already have in this context, evaluate the effectiveness of the current and new solutions, and make policy recommendations both in the short term and in the long term for London as a city, starting to understand what are these three solutions, how feasible they are, and if something can be done. So I think with that, a little bit of the quantitative analysis is that 30% of the jobs in London are at risk, 10 million to be precise, that are located in retail, manufacturing, administrative jobs, and this will happen in a span year of 15 years, in the analysis made by PwC. So with that being done, I already told you what the problem, a little bit of the structure, and why London of 2030 timeframe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You've covered a lot of ground with the range of potential issues that can come. But what I'm wondering is, can you give one specific example from one of those sectors, whether it's retail or whether it's transport, whatever it is, and just walk through a bit of how, for example, that flow diagram, the causal loop diagram, might play out in a particular case?
Yes, so the largest industry here in the US is manufacturing, retail. However, the industry in which I have the knowledge right now in London is the driving industry. So in that case, for example, there is an analysis in which the cars that are being developed with the technology to self-drive cars will take out of employment a lot of drivers and the people that are working in the public sector as like the traffic, how do you call these people? Like the police that tracks the drivers. Why? Because once the cars are automated, the reports will get directly to the headquarters of the police traffic. So only in these two parts of like the amount of jobs that depends on drivers, such as like the post mill, just Uber, like taxis, and in general anything that has to do with like trains, buses, and just day-to-day public transportation. I don't remember exactly the date, the amount of jobs, but that's a huge population. So what is going to happen with those drivers that do not have any other skills? They don't have...
So let me pause you on that, because I think what you're doing is you're going through a good detailed analysis, but for the 10-page term paper, one of the things I might encourage you to look at is narrowing down from the breadth of what you're trying to cover
to the industry,
to a specific case. In other words, not automation in London. London is a good geographic context, but there's so many different automation. And the reason I say that is because each case is going to have its nuances. Like when you take driverless vehicles, as a good example as you're going through it, there are some assumptions there that you can then unpack in much more depth about exactly how much it will transform, because often the devil is in the details, in other words. And there are some of the statements about driverless vehicles are going to simply replace, and then you'll replace all of these other people in the workforce. To some extent that might be true, but there's a lot of, for the period where you're transitioning between driverless cars and cars with drivers, actually we might end up needing more people on the roads in terms of police in order to deal with the fact that automated vehicles behave very differently from human beings. So there are assumptions that you can then begin to unpack and look at, but if you just flip back briefly to your systems diagram, it's a great diagram that has a lot of components within it, but each case is going to play here that it's very differently.
Put like the type of industry. And
in some cases it's not degree of automation that leads to job replacement, but in some cases it leads to job enhancement as opposed to replacement. But that's what I mean about focusing on a particular use case might allow you to get more depth. You've covered a great deal of information, but it's getting one example in detail will help with making the point. And then you can think of who your key, because the other bit that I struggled with is who's your policy actor? Because the City of London has some powers, but only some powers on this, or GLA when I'm thinking of it. So it's having that clarity of then who you're trying to poke at that will make that will take the fantastic foundation that you've put there, but really turn it into something that someone can do something about. Because too many of these conversations end up being as circular as that diagram, because no one can actually nail down on a use case in a particular decision. But you've laid a very good foundation on which to do that next level of deep dive.
Okay, so if I follow, which I probably will follow that recommendation, then the next step will be locate and quantify the uncertainties and the certainties within a specific type of industry.
Exactly, and
policy recommendations.
I might even go further than within an industry to more specific examples of what's happening, or a particular technology within an industry, something that allows you to get very granular, because while it's the concepts that you're talking about are beautiful. They're not actionable, or it's not clear how they're actionable, except in very generic terms. And the more specific you can get, the more focused you can get, the more effective you'll be able to draw a very punchy conclusion to help a policymaker make a decision to the next step.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.